The dispatcher stopped answering at 3 a.m. The trailer was shredded. Whatever did it used bare hands. Then, the woods went completely dead. No frogs, no wind, just a heavy, wet huff from our radio speaker. At the gate, a man in a gray suit handed us the cover-up paperwork. "Just wild hogs," he said. Then his fingers tapped a slow, rhythmic pattern against our door as he made us sign the paper. "Hello, loves. I hope you've got the doors locked, and you're not listening alone. Welcome to Madam Nightmare." Back in the 90s, my partner and I were out on patrol. It was fall, but for some reason, the air inside our Plymouth Cruiser felt thick, like the heater was recycling old, dead air. My partner, Briggs, stared out into the black wall of oaks lining the Kentucky-Tennessee border. When the government flooded the lowlands back in the 60s, they didn't just drown old homesteads. They cut the ridges of Sector 7 off from the rest of the world. After midnight, you're 40 minutes from backup out there. 40 minutes is a lifetime when things go sideways. The radio thumped once, low and heavy. It was Martha dispatching from Cadiz, sounding like she'd been smoking a pack an hour just to stay awake.
"Marcus,"
she said, her voice dropping into that quiet, serious tone she reserved for real trouble.
"I've got a call from the state line payphone. Out-of-state hunter. He was hyperventilating so bad I could barely catch the grid. Said there's something wrong down at the gravel boat ramp in Sector 7. He wouldn't leave a name. Just dumped his change and hung up."
Briggs reached down and turned the volume knob up on the dash. "Did he say what it was?"
"No,"
Martha said.
"just kept saying the word healed. Over and over. Go check it out. And Marcus, keep your lights off till you hit the gravel."
The logging grade down to the water was a mess of deep ruts, smelling of stagnant river silt and rotting leaves. We didn't use the siren. Out here, the noise just alerts whatever you're looking for. We found the clearing by the smell. It was a greasy, hot stench of a hog lot mixed with a chemical odor, like a cracked car battery leaking acid. Our parking lights hit a 20-foot aluminum trailer sitting cockeyed in the mud. The whole side of it looked like a can of soup torn open with a church key. The heavy riveted metal was peeled back in jagged curls. The ashwood framing splintered into gray toothpicks. Whatever did it hadn't used a tool. You could see wide, rough scrapes where something had simply dug in its grip and pulled. Briggs threw his door open, his flashlight cutting a bright line through the mist. His hand went straight to his service leather, popping the safety strap off his revolver. "Marcus," he whispered, stepping into the mud. "Look at the frame." The inside was a disaster. Foam cushions had been shredded into gray wool floating in the humid air, but 2 leather wallets sat untouched right there on the table. A dark, thick smear ran across the plastic tabletop, dripping slow down the side of the bench. "Where's the hunter?" I asked, my voice thin. "Not here," Briggs said, swinging his light toward the riverbank. "Look." 20 yards out, the weeds were flattened down. We followed the trail until the light hit a flannel coat. It was a man. He lay on his back, but his chest didn't look right. It looked like someone had dropped a 3-ton boulder onto his sternum, flattening his ribs wide. His face was untouched, eyes staring straight up into the dark canopy with a flat, empty look. I knelt down, reaching for a wrist out of habit. The skin was already cold. Right then, the woods went completely dead. The tree frogs just vanished. The wind stopped, leaving the air so heavy it felt like trying to breathe underwater. Then came a thud. A wet, heavy sound right behind me. Briggs slowly tilted his flashlight upward, the white beam climbing the trunk of a massive white oak leaning over the clearing. 12 feet up, wedged neatly into the fork of the branches, was a bundle of blue denim and long blonde hair. It was a little girl, looking like a rag doll thrown into the branches and forgotten about. Briggs reached for his shoulder mic, his hand shaking. "Base, this is Unit 4. We've got an 1199 at the Sector 7 ramp. Get the coroner out here. Get everyone. We've got..." The radio didn't static. The speaker let out a long, wet huff. It sounded like the distinct, wet respiration of a pair of lungs that stood upright, 6 feet off the ground. Between every breath came a hard, sharp click from the back of a throat, like two river stones cracking together in a dark room. Briggs dropped the mic. It dangled by its coiled cord, bouncing against the Plymouth's door panel with a dull thud. Something walked out of the laurel thicket across the old logging path. It walked on 2 legs, its weight shifting heavily with a terrifying, deliberate momentum that made the mud vibrate. It was easily 8 feet tall, shoulders broader than the hood of our cruiser, covered in a short, greasy coat of charcoal fur. Its joints bent backward like a dog's as it stepped forward, 3-toed claws sinking deep into the muck. The head was a nightmare of shifting shapes. It had the long snout of a timber wolf, but the skull was too wide, ears pinned flat. Its eyes burned from within, a dull, oily, unblinking red that seemed to absorb the light. Its arms hung past its knees, ending in wide hands with 5 fingers tipped with black talons the size of skinning knives. Briggs brought his service weapon up and pulled the trigger twice. The shots that rang out from the .357 were deafening. The muzzle flashes lit up the fog a smoky blue. The fur on the thing's chest bunched up where the lead struck, but there was no blood. No stumble. The creature just absorbed the hits with a dull whump, like a sandbag thrown into a truck bed. The thing didn't growl. It opened its muzzle, the black skin of its lips peeling back until its jaw unhinged completely, dropping open so wide the joint popped out of its socket. Then it let out a high, metallic screech. The vibration was so intense, I felt it in the fillings of my teeth. The glass lens on Briggs' flashlight cracked right down the center with a sharp ping, the beam dying into a dull amber. "Get in the car," I screamed. We scrambled backwards, boots slipping in the mud as we threw ourselves into the front seat. Briggs slammed the transmission into reverse, the tires spinning as they tore up the turf. In the high beams of the backup lights, we watched the thing drop. It didn't run like a man anymore. It threw its massive hands forward, dropping onto all fours with an erratic, spider-like agility. It bounded through the thick timber, keeping pace with the reversing cruiser, its oily black shape weaving between the oak trunks like a shadow. Every time its weight hit the ground, I could hear the thud through the floorboards of the Plymouth. They hit the blacktop of the Trace doing 60, the rear end of the police car fishtailing wildly before the tires finally grabbed the asphalt. The creature stopped at the tree line, its red eyes glowing in the red wash of our taillights as we sped north toward the bridge. By 3 a.m, the Cadiz dispatcher wasn't answering our calls anymore. When we reached the main gate at Golden Pond, the road was already blocked. 2 olive-drab flatbed trucks from the Valley Authority's Interior Security Force were parked across the lanes, and men in heavy, unmarked canvas jackets were setting up sawhorses. A man in a plain gray suit walked up to Briggs's window. He didn't ask if we were hurt or what we saw. He just handed us 2 single-page documents with the Federal Internal Security Act header printed at the top. "The campsite is being managed," the man said, his voice flat and completely devoid of inflection. A rabid pack of feral hogs came down from the Cumberland Ridge. The family was caught in the open. "You two are going to take the rest of the week off." I looked out the side window. Behind the sawhorses, an enclosed flatbed trailer was already heading down the south lane toward Sector 7, followed by a yellow utility bulldozer. "They're burying the trailer, aren't they?" I asked, my voice shaking. The man in the suit didn't answer. He just leaned his hand on the door frame, his fingers tapping a slow, rhythmic pattern against the cold metal. "Sign the paperwork, deputy," the man said softly. "The perimeter is unsecure, and you don't want to be out here while the sun is down." I signed my name on the bottom line. Beside me, Briggs didn't say a word. He just stared straight ahead through the cracked windshield. The man in the gray suit took the clipboards back, gestured to the men at the sawhorses, and the barricade parted just enough for the cruiser to slip through toward the highway. We drove for 20 minutes in total silence before Briggs finally spoke. "We didn't see anything, Marcus. That's what the paper says." "I know what the paper says," I told him, looking out at the dark wall of the forest passing by. "But the mud on my boots says different." The official press release was published in the local weekly paper on Thursday, buried on page 4 beneath the high school football scores. "Camping accident at land between the lakes." Federal authorities have closed Sector 7 of the Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area following a fatal wildlife encounter early Tuesday morning. A family of 3 from out of state was reportedly attacked by a pack of diseased feral hogs that had migrated down from the high ridges. Due to public safety concerns regarding the spread of pseudorabies, the entire sector has been quarantined for environmental remediation. The public is advised to avoid the West Ridge loops until further notice. I folded the newspaper and placed it inside my desk drawer, right next to a small glass specimen jar containing a wire-like gray hair I had pulled off the patrol car that night. The modern USGS topographical charts for the Virginia-Kentucky border show a blank, white polygon. It sits there like a missing tooth, labeled simply as an unresolved atmospheric hazard. The locals don't go near it. They call the drainage basin Dead Man's Sinking. In late November, the mountain is usually loud with the sound of dying timber, shale sliding down the ridges, crows fighting over deer guts, the relentless, mechanical scream of 2-stroke chainsaw engines. But on a Tuesday morning, the noise stopped. A 6-man cutting crew left 3,000 pounds of yellow heavy machinery idling in the mud at the lip of a limestone ravine. They left their lunchboxes sitting on the tailgates. They left their personal trucks unlocked with the keys in the ignitions, and they ran 3 miles down the logging grade on foot until their boots tore open. When the local sheriff met the foreman at the highway gate, the man couldn't look him in the eye. He just kept wiping greasy, grease-colored sweat off his neck, muttering that the mountain had folded inward. A state forestry investigator named Vance went up alone to secure the site before the winter storms hit. He was an old-timer, 9 years walking the ridges. the kind of man who could tell you the breed of an animal by the way a single twig was snapped. He found the logging site exactly as they left it. The diesel engines had finally choked out from lack of fuel, leaving the clearing thick with the sour chemical reek of unburnt fuel and stale iron. He didn't find any tracks. No boot prints, no bear paws, just a strange, localized rot. A century-old sugar maple at the edge of the clearing hadn't been blown over. It had been wrung out. The trunk was splintered into long, hairy fibers, twisted clockwise until the heartwood split open. The mud beneath it was frozen solid, but it looked pushed down, as if something incredibly heavy had simply rested its weight there without ever stepping forward. Vance reached for his shoulder mic to call the district dispatcher. The radio let out a dry, rhythmic clicking. It sounded exactly like someone running a thumbnail down the teeth of a plastic pocket comb, over and over, faster and faster, until the cadence blurred into a wet, heavy rattle, like a man trying to clear phlegm out of a crushed throat. Vance lowered the radio. From the dense laurel thicket across the ravine, the exact same rattle clicked back at him. They found Vance 24 hours later, wandering the yellow center line of Route 611. His fingernails were gone, his fingertips worn down to the raw pink meat from clawing at the limestone ledges. The temperature that afternoon was a mild 50 degrees, but his chin and lower lip were caked in a thick, crystalline crust of gray frost. He didn't look at the paramedics. He just stared at the dashboard of the ambulance. When they finally got a pencil into his hand, he didn't write a report. He just scribbled the same paragraph over and over until the graphite snapped. It's not an animal. Its legs don't work right. The joints are all bulging and bent, like an insect trying to walk like a man. It sat in the shadow behind the tool shed. It didn't make a sound. It just used my own voice to tell me what it was going to do to my kids. The regional office sent a 5-man recovery team into the sinking 48 hours later. They were carrying heavy-gauge shotguns and military-grade cold weather gear, expecting a rabid pack or a feral squatter. They never found Vance's truck. Instead, 300 yards into the timber, they hit the dead zone. The forest went completely quiet, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring until your teeth ache. Then the sound came. It wasn't a roar. It was their own dispatcher's voice, clear and perfectly modulated, calling out from the bottom of a limestone sinkhole. She was reading off their home addresses. She was listing the names of their wives. But the dispatcher was currently sitting in a brick building 60 miles away in Roanoke. When the team leader ordered a retreat, the voice changed instantly. It didn't pause for breath. It became the team leader's own voice, screaming for help from the dark brush, while he was standing right there on the trail, watching his own words come out of the trees. They found the cave at the bottom of the draw by following the smell. The floor of the cavern was a carpet of black hair and gray fur, wild hogs, deer, stray hounds from the local farms. None of them had been eaten. Their hides were perfectly intact, completely bloodless. But when the tracker stepped on a carcass, the animal's legs folded like wet cardboard. Every single bone inside the skin had been shattered into fine white gravel, the marrow drawn out through tiny scorched holes in the joints. The air pressure in the cave dropped so fast the men's noses began to bleed. The temperature went from late autumn chill to deep winter freeze in the span of 3 heartbeats. Something moved in the high fissures of the ceiling. It didn't drop down. It uncoiled. It was huge, 8 or 9 feet of oily, hairless black hide, its limbs long and jointed like a starved spider. The head was heavy and blunt, but when the jaw dropped, the skin of its throat split open down to the brisket, revealing thousands of tiny, translucent needles that didn't look like teeth. They looked like glass. The point man panicked and emptied 3 rounds of 12-gauge buckshot into the center of its mass. The lead pellets didn't penetrate. They made a dull, heavy thud, like a bat hitting an old tractor tire. The thing didn't even recoil. It just leaned forward, unhinged its chest, and let out a high, warbling hum that shattered the lenses of their flashlights and turned the water in their canteens to solid ice. They ran. They didn't look back until they hit the highway gate. The Department of the Interior closed the access roads the following Monday. They dumped 40 tons of blasted rock into the mouth of the ravine and took dead man sinking off the state registers. But the detail that keeps the local rangers from ever walking those ridges after sundown isn't the size of the thing, or what it does to the bone marrow. It's the way it hunts. It stays in the deep hollows, listening. It can catch a name whispered 5 miles away through the trees. It stores the sound in that wet, hollow chest, stretching the vowels until they sound perfect. So if you're ever out past the trail markers and you hear your mother, or your friend, or your own self calling to you from the dark timber, don't look. Don't answer. It's already got your voice. It just wants the rest of you. The mud in the Pelican backcountry doesn't behave like normal dirt. It's an ancient, sulfurous slurry, gray as a wet slate, pushed up from the magma pockets 3 miles beneath the park crust. In August, the tourists stay on the boardwalks over at Norris, watching the water boil in the sun. They don't see the Pelican. It's too far back. 16 miles of trackless lodgepole pine and bogs that smell like a broken battery. Artie Cole had a mule named Jasper that could smell a thermal vent through 6 inches of solid turf. If the ground was brittle, Jasper would stop, his ears pinning back until Artie steered him around the gray crust. But on the night of August 22nd, Jasper didn't stop. He just went rigid. Artie was trailing 4 outfitters from Billings who had taken a pack train into the Basin 3 days ago and missed their checkout at the lake station. He found their camp just before twilight, right where the lodge poles gave way to the big, open salt flats. The camp was completely still. The outfitters' 2 heavy canvas wall tents were still staked down, but the canvas had been slit open from the grass line up to the ridge poles. It wasn't a bear's work. A grizzly tears a tent down to get at the bacon. These were clean, vertical slices, as if someone had run a straight razor through the weave from inside the dirt. All the gear, the sleeping bags, the iron frying pans, the rifles, was still sitting there, cold and untouched. Artie dismounted, keeping his fingers looped through Jasper's halter. The first thing that crawled into his throat was the silence. The Pelican is usually a loud, miserable place at dusk. Mosquitoes hum so thick you can taste them, and the sandhill cranes down in the marsh give a constant, prehistoric rattle. Nothing was rattling. The valley had gone dry. Then the ground gave a slow, sickening lurch. It wasn't an earthquake. Artie had been through the '59 quake at Hebgen Lake. That was a sharp, fracturing snap that broke the ridges. This was different. The gray prairie sod under his boots rose up 3 inches, then sank back down in a slow, oily circle, the way pond water ripples when a big mud catfish rolls near the bottom. Jasper let out a high, rattling scream. a sound Artie had never heard a mule make in his 20 years of packing. The animal didn't try to turn. It just reared straight back, snapping the leather-led rope like a piece of kite string, and bolted into the dark trees, its steel shoes clattering against the loose obsidian until the sound choked out. Artie didn't follow the mule. If you run in the Pelican after dark, you break through a thin shelf of silica and drop into 400 degrees of boiling mud. He pulled his Motorola radio off his hip, his thumb slick with cold sweat against the rubber casing. "Lake Station, this is Cole," he said, his voice coming out thin. "I'm at the outfitter camp. The tents are empty. We've got something. The Basin floor is moving, Station. It's sliding sideways." The speaker didn't give him the normal hiss of the park repeater. It let out a fast, sharp screech that sounded like someone tearing a dry bedsheet in half, over and over, until the noise settled into a heavy, rhythmic thudding. It was the sound of something massive shifting its bulk through deep, wet clay. The air temperature dropped 30 degrees in the span of 5 seconds. Artie's next breath came out as a white cloud. The marsh grass at the edge of the clearing didn't just frost over, it went white and brittle, the stalks snapping with a sound like breaking glass as the moisture inside them instantly turned to ice. The small mud pot 20 yards behind the tents, a pool of sulfuric water that had been boiling since the Ice Age, simply stopped spitting. The surface went gray, then milky, then locked hard into solid ice. Then the left-hand tent vanished. It didn't fall over. The stakes didn't pull out of the ground. The earth beneath the canvas simply went soft, turning into a gray, swirling liquid for a fraction of a second, and the whole structure slid straight down into the dirt like a stone dropped into a bucket of lard. The mud closed back over the top of the canvas, flat and gray and dry, leaving nothing but an empty square of dead grass. Artie didn't look for his gun. He scrambled up the nearest lodgepole pine, his boots skinning the rough bark until he was 10 feet off the ground, wedged into a fork of dry branches that smelled of old resin. He stayed there until the sun started to come up. The 4-man recovery team from the Lake District didn't find Artie until 5 the next morning. They found him shivering in the pine, his hands frozen to the bark so hard they had to peel his fingers loose one by one. His uniform jacket was stiff with frost, though the valley floor was back to its usual 63-degree August damp. The camp was gone. The white volcanic earth where the tents had been was bleached out, turned into a powdery, chalky dust that smelled like vinegar and old tinfoil. The trackers didn't see the thing until they brought out the heavy survey scopes at 6 a.m. It wasn't an animal. It was a pale, segmented shape moving through the deep clay beneath the meadow, 40 yards wide, its white hide shimmering through the topsoil like a big fish swimming under a thin pane of lake ice. It didn't have legs, or eyes, or a head. The front end of it was just an opening, a white, calcified ring that didn't look like bone. It looked like the stone ridges inside a geyser cone, thousands of tiny crystalline teeth that were constantly vibrating, chewing through the solid rock and turning the granite into liquid silt before the earth cooled back down behind it. It didn't eat the horses or the men. It just lay there under the soil, absorbing the heat out of the valley until the grass died and the mud froze solid. The Park Service didn't file a report with the state. By the following Tuesday, the trail crew from Canyon had cleared the footbridges over Pelican Creek with chainsaws. They didn't replace them. They took the valley off the backcountry maps, changed the trail markers to lead the hikers north toward Lamar, and put up 4 miles of steel wire along the ridge lines with the yellow lethal gas hazard signs. The old-timers at the lake station still don't take their horses past the wire, even when an elk wanders back in there during the autumn hunt. They know how it works now. The thing under the basin doesn't look for you. It listens. It stays down in the dark clay, waiting for the heavy, rhythmic thud of a boot or a hoof against the crust. So if you're ever out past the boundary wire and you feel the ground go soft under your heel, if the air suddenly goes cold enough to turn your breath to fog in the middle of August, don't run. Don't take another step. Or every time your weight hits the dirt, it's just telling that thing exactly where to open its mouth. If you made it through tonight's collection, pass it on to someone you want to keep safe, or maybe someone special you'd like to haunt. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next nightmare. Until next time, loves, stay safe and sleep well.